welcome back to Odd Socks. Now I thought today I would do a quick, easy recipe. Well, in fact, there's going to be 3. Bread doesn't have to be hard. So I'm going to show you a pizza dough, a no-knead bread, and some fantastic flatbreads. Now all of these you can add your own flavours into these particular breads, whatever you want to do, so long as it's not too wet of an ingredient. But first off, show you how I make my pizza dough. The great thing about pizza dough is that it can be frozen and taken out the morning or a few hours before, depending on the temperature, before you want to actually use it. So you've always got the option of having beautiful tasting pizza. So first off, I'm actually going to show you that. We're going to make a little bit of a mess. First off, you're going to need a kilo of strong bread flour. Now you can use 800 grams of bread flour and 200 grams of semolina flour, but I haven't got any of that today, so we're going to use a kilo of bread flour. And this is where we're going to make a bit of a mess. So we're going to pop that to the side first, and then in 650 ml of lukewarm water. You don't want it hot because it will kill your yeast, but we're going to get it started and leave it for a minute or 2. Now we need 2 teaspoons of dried yeast. Now I'm using fast-acting yeast. Also going to add a tablespoon of sugar to this mix. Now the sugar basically feeds your yeast. You're not going to taste it in your bread. And then we're going to need some olive oil. Now I'm using rapeseed oil because I just prefer rapeseed oil. It's supporting British and it's a little bit cheaper than olive oil. You need about 4 tablespoons. So I'm going to do a bit of a glug in there. I'm just going to give that a little bit of a stir. Now your yeast will probably clump up. Don't worry about it, it's fine. This is all about easy bread making, not over stressing things out. You can just add it straight to your flour and do it that way. And to be honest, that's the way I normally do it. So we've got our kilo of flour, and on a clean work surface, we're going to tip it out because it's a little bit easier to work with. And you're going to make yourself a little well in the middle. This is where all your wet ingredients are going to go. Okay. And you're literally just going to pour in your wet ingredients. Now I'll pour in until I get to a certain height. Just make sure you don't break the dam. You can also add a little bit of flour as you go. Oh, that went well. To be honest, do it in a bowl. Try not to be fancy. Now it should start all coming together, slowly but surely. Just keep working it. You may need a little bit more water or a little bit more flour, but don't judge it straight away. Work it a bit first before you add any extra ingredient. Now, I don't make bread that needs to be kneaded very often. It's not because I don't like it. It's because I really do struggle with my condition and doing this kind of movement. But we're running short of pizza dough. This will supply us with enough pizza dough for a little while at least. Now, I'm not a master baker, but I do enjoy my bread. Now, many moons ago, before I got, well, a lot worse than what I am actually now, I used to make bread almost daily. But I've kind of lost that skill a little bit. But this pizza dough is very forgiving. And you want to literally roll and knead, and you want to push it down with as much strength as what you've actually got, because what you're trying to do is stretch it out to give that gluten a really good workout. If I was you, do it in a bowl at first to bring it all together. There's no need to do it on your table. It's just trying to be fancy. And it kicked me in the backside. Now, if you've got a really good food processor, or a food mixer even, and you've got dough hooks, you can do it with the dough hooks. I haven't got one, so I'm not going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. And I think I'm almost there. Thank goodness. Now what we need to do, once we get this to that stage, is we'll pop it into a well-oiled bowl. Now you don't want it to sit in necessarily a big pool of oil, but you want to be able to do it so it doesn't actually overly stick to the sides of your bowl as it proves. Now this bread will need about an hour to double in size, but again it depends on the conditions of where you're doing it. Today it's quite warm, so I can't see it being very long to actually double up in size. Now you need it to get smooth, so you'll end up with a nice dough. This will go into a well-oiled bowl and cover it lightly with either a tea towel or some cling film. Now we've made all that mess, I'm going to make another bread. Again, that may actually make a bit of mess. Now, I like making all these breads around about the same time because the amount of mess that I actually make, it doesn't matter about a little bit of dough left on this table at the moment because we're going to be making another mess. The next bread we're going to do is a really, really tasty flatbread. So we're going to need 350 grams of self-raising flour. And then into that mix, we're going to add 350 grams of natural yogurt. Now, to be honest, it's almost a pot, just shy. So 350 grams of self-raising flour, 350 grams of your natural yogurt, and a teaspoon of baking powder. This will just give it a little bit of fluffiness. And before you get your hands in there, which you don't really need to do, you're just going to mix it and just get it combined. Now this is a really, really simple, easy, fast recipe. No proving, it can literally be made straight away. And it gives you the most fluffiest, lightest flatbreads. Now, I've included this recipe in here because you may be growing some things on your allotment that you can actually fill those wraps. There's certain fruits and vegetables that are absolutely beautiful char grilled. Your tomatoes will be ripening and harvesting soon. Your beetroots, adding in a little bit of feta, or if you're a meat eater, some nice slices of chicken, grilled or however you want to have it. It's the perfect bread to have however you want it. Now I'm going to add a little bit of flour to my table because this dough is very sticky and it only needs a little bit of kneading. But it's more just to get it combined. And basically you just want to have it onto a lightly floured surface and just work it enough to bring it together. Now you shouldn't need any more liquid for this recipe, but you might need a little bit of extra flour to make it not so sticky. And we're just literally going to roll it around a bit until it loses some of that stickiness. You don't want it too firm, you want to leave it soft. But bringing it together a little bit, adding a little bit of extra flour, it will just really help when you're rolling these out in a minute. And basically that's that. Now you can use this at any point, but it doesn't need necessarily resting. You can rest it for 10-20 minutes, it's not an issue. Now these do make actually quite a bit of flatbreads. Now it is handy to have an extra bit of flour on your surface for when you're cutting. It just helps. Now depending on how big you want your flatbreads will dictate how big you cut them. But remember, they're not thick when you roll them, so you will need to have a hot griddle pan or a frying pan that will actually take the size that you've got. Now this is made 8 for me. Now I'm just going to roll these little balls into a little bit of flour so they don't stick together. I'm no master baker or master chef. These never turn out perfectly round, but trust me, it really doesn't matter. Now you want them quite thin, literally about 3mm, because they'll puff up really nicely in the pan. Now once you've got it all rolled out, what you need to be doing is getting a nice pan on and getting it very, very hot. And that's exactly what I'm going to do now. Now all it needs is a couple of minutes on each side. Even those little crispy burnt bits are absolutely fantastic. It really does add that depth of flavour. Now you'll notice it start puffing up a little bit. Once you're done with each one, if you wrap it in some kitchen foil and stack them together, this will create a bit of moisture and it will make the flatbreads so soft and billowing. Pop them in the oven and they'll keep warm on a very low heat. I try and use 2 pans at a time just to kind of get through them a little bit quicker. Now once they're cooked, you can either use them straight away, stack them in the oven and keep them warm wrapped in some kitchen foil. Or you can keep them separated with a little bit of baking paper and actually pop them into the freezer, just to keep them separated as they freeze. And then you can literally just take some out, heat them back up in a pan from frozen whenever you want one of those wraps. It's an absolute lifesaver. And they go with so many different types of foods. And it's fantastic with some yogurt dips, which you can choose so many different types of yogurt dips to go with it. The next little bread recipe I'm going to do is no knead bread. Now with this recipe you can add different flavoured ingredients as well into the dough mixture. Now it really is no knead. You don't mess around with it once it's all combined at the beginning. You just leave it. Now you can leave it anything, it needs between 8 and 24 hours. It will be dictated by the temperatures in your surroundings. But literally you mix it up and you just cover it and leave it be. It's a really, really simple bread. So if you can't do much kneading, like me, you can actually, being organised, make yourself a loaf of bread a day with very little effort. So we're going to need more flour. Again, it's strong bread flour. And you're going to need 400 grams of this. And I'm using just the old bread bowl because, well, what's the point in dirtying another dish or even washing up yet? And you also need to make sure that you're adding some salt as well. Just make sure that your salt's away from your yeast because you don't want to kill your yeast first off. 1.5 teaspoons. I will add all the recipes into the descriptions so it makes life a little bit easier for you guys, just in case I'm jumping around a little bit from recipe to recipe. It's 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. In fact, I'm using just under half. And I'm just going to make a well in the middle. And all you're going to do is add 350 ml of lukewarm water. and you just need to mix it up. Now this is supposed to be a very wet mixture, but I find with certain flours you may need a little bit more, which in this case I do. And I find certain brands, certain makes definitely need a lot more than others, or even a lot less. Play it by eye. You don't need to overmix. You just need to make sure that it's all incorporated. I think that's about right. Bread making is really about experience as well. You kind of get used to your breads, especially in different homes. It can all react differently. Okay, and that's the texture that you're looking for. You want a really soft, sticky dough, not something that you can actually handle yourself with your hands. And I'm just going to scrape all the rest of the dough off the side. And that is going to go and sit somewhere. Now, I'm happy to leave mine for about 24 hours. You get a really nice, good texture from that. These no-knead breads are normally made in a Dutch oven. But I've been experimenting a little bit more with my little Ninja. So today I'm going to try it in my Ninja. But if you do have a Dutch oven or a heavy-based casserole pot with a lid, this is absolutely fantastic. It will be pretty much the same methods as I'm going to use with my Ninja. So this needs to be covered with some cling film to keep any other bacteria and things out. Keep it somewhere nice and warm, not in any drafts, and this will be ready between 8 and 24 hours later once it's doubled in size. But lo and behold, here's one I made earlier. You'll notice that there's loads of little air holes, and this is a really good sign that the yeast is doing something. Now this is twice the size of what it was when I first had it, and what we're going to do next, just rework it. This is ready to be knocked back. Knocking back just means you're taking some of the air out of the bread. Again, on a floury surface. We are just going to start working this. Actually going to take this out of the bowl and actually put it onto the work surface. Now this is incredibly wet dough and it's not really overly workable. But you'll be able to smell the yeast. It's almost beer-like in actual smell. And all we're going to do, I'm just going to lightly dust it and I'm just going to work it a little bit. Again, really wet dough, very, very messy. Now it's really good if you've got a dough blade because it will really help with this. And I'm not going to overwork it because we don't want to undo all the work that we did making that dough in the first place. And what we need to get is a piece of baking paper. You can turn this out onto the baking paper. And actually knead it on there. Now one of the reasons that you do use a Dutch oven is one, it's great for baking, but it also helps it keep its shape. I should be okay in the Ninja. Now one of the things I like about doing bread, multiple different bread recipes in one go, is I don't have to clean up 3 or 4 times over the week doing it. I can kind of just do it after I've made all the mess in the first place. Now if you are using a Dutch oven, make sure you preheat it in the oven before putting the bread in. It needs about 20 minutes on a temperature of about 230, a fan oven about 210. Again, it's really quite important to heat that crock pot. And then what you're going to do is keeping that dough on the paper itself, you're going to lower that into your pot, keeping the dough on top of the paper. So because I'm using my Ninja, I'm actually going to prove it for a little bit longer in the actual Ninja itself. So once you've got your dough on your paper, you want to pop it in. Now, given that 20 minutes or so to rest will actually allow it to reprove again, giving it a little bit better shape. While I've got that on proof, I'll show you some of the flatbreads, how they are. Now, wrapping them in some kitchen foil, keeping them warm, will actually make them fantastic and perfect for wrapping without that tear. I don't know whether you've bought shop-bought wraps, and they always tear even if you warm them up. You cannot beat something like this. This one's a little bit thin, but the texture, it's so good. Now you can wrap those up and put them into the freezer and store them long term, ready to be used at a later date. Now my pizza dough is ready to be cut. And because I'm not actually using it today, I'm actually going to store it in the freezer. I'm going to use some food bags. And I'm going to store individual pizza amounts in this. You can store the whole pizza dough in a bag in the freezer and freeze it. Absolutely fine, it will last a few months. When you're ready to use it again, all you need to do is just defrost it, keep it in the bag and let it fully defrost. And then from there on, you can cut it up into whatever size portions you want, flatten it, stretch it, however you want to make your pizza base, and it will be absolutely fine and ready to use. It's a real godsend when it comes to trying to find something to eat. Now I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on this, just so I can make more mess, just so it doesn't overly stick. Now, as you can see, it really has expanded. It really doesn't take that long, especially in the summer months. I'm going to just cut it up into portions. Now in general, this will give you about 8 medium-sized pizzas. But it really does depend on your taste and how big a portion. Again, how big your oven is. Now, because there's 3 of us, into portions of 3. So basically, I'm not wasting my bag. Now, it doesn't matter if these reprove before you get them into the freezer a little bit, because you can just recut them up after you've defrosted the bag and reportion it. And you want as much air out of there as possible. Now these bags are quite big for this. I could have literally just put them all into one bag, but I do like to keep it kind of separated. And that's 8 pizza doughs ready to be used whenever I fancy. Just literally take it out in the morning. It will defrost on the counter or in the fridge. Leave it to reprove a little bit and it's ready to be used. And all you do is just treat it like you would do with any pizza dough, giving you the opportunity to use your lovely fresh ingredients, your herbs, your tomatoes, anything that you've got growing on your plot on top of your pizza. And as the tomatoes roll in, I'll be showing you how I make my tomato sauces for my pizza toppings. Also my pasta sauces and other tomatoes as they come in. With the flatbreads, literally use them in any way you see fit. They can wrap your fantastic barbecue meats, your char-grilled vegetables. Use your imagination, fill it and cram it with foods that you absolutely love. It makes a fantastic meal. Making yogurt dips or making different sauces all adds to the flavour with that flatbread. But trust me, you will not be disappointed with that flatbread. It really is a tasty addition to your freezer. Don't know whether you can hear me over the noise of this. The one downside to the Ninjas and kind of air fryers in general, they're really, really loud. So that is now done. Incredibly noisy. Okay, so when you've baked your bread, now this has been a bit of an experiment with this particular dough in this Ninja. So we'll actually see together how it turns out. Now you want to open it up quite soon after it's actually finished baking, otherwise it can go really quite soggy. Not bad. Sounds hollow, and the bottom sounds hollow. Now, it's not the prettiest thing, but if you took the time to manipulate the dough a little bit, or you used a Dutch oven, which will actually keep it nicely formed on the outside, it would actually look a little bit better. But do you know what? I actually prefer the rustic look. And it does sound hollow. Maybe a couple of minutes more, but we'll leave this to cool a little bit before we actually cut into it, so we don't damage the actual loaf. Today we have done pizza dough, which we've packaged up, ready to be used at a later date. Now our flatbreads, I've managed to cook them all, and as you can see, nice, soft and billowy. Just make sure that you're keeping them wrapped up in foil. This keeps them nice and moist and stops them drying out. But one of the ways I enjoy having these flatbreads is with beetroot. We still have some beetroot that we grew last year in the freezer, and we've also just harvested some fresh beetroot just yesterday. Now this has just been quickly cooked. Cooking it in the oven really adds an extra sweetness to your beetroot. That's my beetroot that I've got on here. Now with the little bit of yoghurt that you've got left over from your flatbread mix, you can make a really nice mint and yoghurt dressing. Now you want to pummel your mint and sugar together first, and then add your yoghurt with a little bit of salt to cut through that sweetness. But it will really lift these beetroots. Now because these wraps are still warm, they are incredibly easy to fold. And that's it. As you can see, they are so supple that you won't get any tearing when you're preparing your food. And it really is the perfect way to enjoy some of your fresh produce that you're now growing and soon to harvest. So I'm going to cut this open. It's not quite cooled down enough yet, but we'll have a look. Now you want it to cool down a bit so it actually does make it easier to actually slice. That's beautiful. Now it's lovely and soft, not doughy. It's not staying back. But I'm really looking forward to this little end piece. But of course, it's got to have a good bit of butter on it. If any of these recipes have given you any inspiration, let me know in the comments. What would you do with these breads? What would you use from your allotment to accompany these 3 bread recipes? Let me know in the comments below. I love learning new ways and new recipes to use the food that we produce. It doesn't always have to be just boiled veg or roasted veg. You can incorporate them into many, many different things. With the bread, you could roast your garlic in the oven and add that puree to the first mix, adding it and making it into a garlic bread. With the flatbreads, you could melt some butter, adding again some garlic that you've cooked in the oven, just because it gives it that little bit sweeter flavour. Or add herbs to the butter, and after it's been cooked, brush over with a little bit of melted butter. Absolutely fantastic. We do it with coriander if we're having an Indian meal, or a nice bit of garlic butter as a garlic flatbread to go with any pasta dishes. It really is yummy. The normal bread, again, you can literally add garlic or olives or rosemary. Any flavour that you want you can add to this. You can even top cheese on the top and to give you a nice crusty cheesy loaf. And your pizza, well, what can't you put on your pizza? I love my pizza with all the different vegetables that you can find down the allotment, be it spinach, even beetroots, your corn when you finally get a little bit of fresh corn, your basils, your parsleys, even your coriander. It doesn't have to be just meat based. There is lots of tasty things that you could be growing on your allotment to put on top of your pizzas. I'm going to try and do more recipes as I go along. I'm just finding my feet when it comes to doing this kind of filming. If this kind of video is something that you actually enjoy, why don't you like and subscribe? This will keep you up to date with any videos that we release in the future. There'll be many, many more recipes coming in the very near future, but I'm trying to do it as the harvest dictates on my allotment at the moment. As we go through the year, there'll be more recipes available, but also how we store and prep to keep for our long-term food storage. So again, if this is something that you enjoy, like and subscribe. You'll be able to keep up to date with any new videos that we release.